Can you tell me how this could possibly happen? Well, part of it is no big project, really, in reality. And I asked that to, I can't think of his name now, he's a Dutch guy who works for the Department of Environment. Anyhow, you know who he is, Van der Land. I asked, how many of these big projects are actually rejected by EIAs? I think it's something like 2%, maybe 1 or 2%, and most of them decided not to do it because most of them get variances. And the guy on the phone said to me off the record, well, these corridor resources wells got there because we issued variances for them. So it didn't matter that we had a Wetland Act, a Clean Water Act, or a Clean Environment Act. It was immaterial. Your regulations are immaterial. What does it matter? And you can always be if you're going to always be given variances. It matters nothing what you're doing or what you're asking us to do. Bruce Northrop avoided it 4 different times. All I want to know is, are those wells being monitored? Can they be monitored every 6 months? I want to know the results of the monitoring. No, I know those wells are permanent liabilities. If they were shut down tomorrow, we were going to have to look after them for 1,000 years. And that includes, in terms of Schlumberger, I'm pronouncing it wrong, that includes 6.2% of wellheads leaking the first year, and in the first 15 years, 50%. So it wasn't really fantasy that these people may have seen bubbles coming up to the top, but try to get the monitoring going on. Request, get the monitoring going on. Okay. I'm a member of New Brunswick Water First, and this is a press release, okay? And I'm going to read the press release. We, the members of New Brunswick Water First, are shocked and alarmed to discover that 17 unconventional gas wells, many of them active and being fracked, are built on the floodplain of the Kennebecasis River in Penobscot, going right down through Hampton, Quispamsis. Where does our water come from, wells, people? What happens under the ground? There's no mapping. Despite international efforts by industry to prevent gas wells leaking their contents into the surrounding soil, water, and air, well leakages due to sustained casing pressure are common, occurring at a rate of over 5%, I gave you not 6.2, in the first year, and increasing with age to a leakage rate of 50% after 15 years. Once, sometimes twice a year, the gas well sites in Penobscot are covered with floodwater, which then returns to the Kennebecasis River. Further, the gas well casings in Penobscot are even more likely to discharge their contents as the surrounding earth is sliding laterally and sinking due to mining subsidence in the area, and you're all familiar with that. It's moving this way and this way. Will that not crack some concrete casings? According to Dr. Anthony Engagrment, rock mechanics specialist at Cornell University, nowhere else in North America are gas wells built on floodplains. Even in the worst places in North America. At a public presentation delivered in Hampton on December 1st, 2011, he stated, this was a no-brainer. The new recommendations, to your credit, proposed by the Oil and Gas Group also prohibit such sites for construction of gas wells in the future. The problem for New Brunswickers and those living in the Kennebecasis Valley here is that these wells are already here for 1,000 years. Okay? We fish, we swim, we grow food and farm in the valley. Most of our fresh drinking water comes from wells dependent on the Kennebecasis watershed and its subsurface hydrology. There are many geologic faults throughout this valley. These people behind me show the Kennebecasis fault is from 6 to 30 kilometers deep. There's 2 more paragraphs and I'm going to finish. Okay? The Kennebecasis fault runs almost the full distance of the river and at places underneath the river with depths of 6 to 30 kilometers. Enough for frac fluid? The many faults are possible passageways for the toxic frac liquid and methane to enter our freshwater system and threaten our communities, Rossay, Quispamsis, Hampton, the rest, water supplies. There has been no thorough or consistent underground hydraulic mapping of the valley. Because of the above, we, New Brunswick Water First, demand that, 1, the New Brunswick government decommission these 17 wells since they present a clear and present danger. Now! monitor these well sites on a monthly basis for leakage of methane gas and toxic frac chemicals. You know what are the chemicals. You said since last summer you know what the chemicals. Monitor for them and see if they're leaking. The Kennebecasis River water immediately downriver from these 17 well sites be monitored monthly for methane and toxic frac chemicals. The Department of Environment can do that. Right. You gotta protect your citizens. We hire you for this. And the results of the above testing be made public to reassure Valley residents of their safety of their environment. We are scared. You are our government. You are here to protect us, not to exploit us. Thank you.
I live in the town of Crispin-Sis, which means Little Lake in the woods. The woods may be less, the lake's still there. I swim every day in the Kennebecasis River, and I have a well that gives me delicious drinking water. I went to school a while ago, and I learned some basic ideas about water, which have served me well in trying to make sense of the world around me through, I forget how many decades. But maybe they're outdated. But the peculiar thing is that on the display that was up earlier today in the news, I hear things said about water that don't fit with what I learned all those many years ago. The display in the back said that about 48% of New Brunswick of runoff water is what supplies the lakes and rivers. I'm going to work up to what I'd like to do is ask the hydrologist on the panel, after I give a brief explanation of what I think I learned in school about water, to comment and see if it's still valid. But I heard an official from Calgary this morning on the news say that they would never think of fracking anywhere near groundwater. And someone today mentioned the statement that you would never frack through an aquifer. So these are terms: groundwater, runoff, aquifer, that are being thrown around. And I'm going to show how my understanding from high school of what these words mean, and find out if that's what they still mean. Groundwater is everywhere underfoot, to my understanding. Sometimes you have to dig 80 feet if you're in the Sahara. Here, usually 2 or 3 feet will do it. This level of groundwater approximately follows the contours of the hills. So if you drilled 1,000 feet from a 1,000-foot high hill, you would be approximately at the level of the valley. Would be my understanding of that. And it's a continuous body of water. Once you've hit the water table, understandably the pores get smaller under pressure, but of course there are the faults. But this water is always moving, is always circulating, usually downhill gradually. My understanding is that there's more water moving in the ground than there is in rivers. That the rivers are a small part of the movement of water toward the ocean. And there occasionally, the aquifers are places where there's an opportunity for water to move more quickly because of openings or because of pressure. Sometimes the pressure is such and the openings are such that the water is driven upward instead of its usual gradual downward percolation. And I think that's called an artesian spring. And the way I learned it in school is that runoff is a small part of the amount of water that is in rivers and lakes. Naturally, in a deluge, you get a lot of runoff. But it's an unfortunate thing if the runoff is the major proportion. That means that the ground cover has been destroyed, that the ground is not absorbing water. It's ideally, water moves through the ground. And the rivers and lakes are an expression of the groundwater surface intersecting with the land surface. And most of a river is not the water in the channel, it's the water that's flowing in the banks and underground. And that's why rivers can disappear and then resurface and so on. So that's my basic understanding of the concepts of groundwater, runoff, aquifer, etc. And I wonder if the hydrologist can comment on whether I'm up to date and on whether there is any sense to the idea that we would never frack near groundwater, or that runoff is what accounts for the lakes and rivers, which was on the display in the back.
Sure. I'll try to make it quick. Sorry. So yeah, a lot of your concepts are correct. Groundwater is water in the ground. In terms of aquifers, we're referring to groundwater that's being used for a purpose. It's being exploited. That's when it's referred to as an aquifer, typically. There's a difference, though, between shallow groundwater, which is what you were referring to.
Actually, I was referring to a continuum of water all the way down.
Okay. Well, then there are different levels of groundwater. There's the shallow aquifer, which are shallow groundwater, which is open to atmosphere, that it's not under any confining pressure. And that's typically, yes, there's a lot of interplay between surface water, like discharging into streams and whatnot, and rainwater. There's more interaction there. The deeper you go, the further traveled the groundwater itself is, and the more confined it is. So in terms of like fast moving groundwater, when we speak about groundwater at depths in aquifers, we're talking about many wells in the province are maybe 100, 150 feet to get into fractured bedrock in the aquifers. The extent of groundwater in the province, like the deepest well in the province, is around 200 meters, and it's not really a potable water well, but that is about the deepest well that we have in the province currently.
Mine's 900 feet.
Feet, I'm talking meters.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so that's how many meters? 300.
300, really? And you're drinking from it?
We have to. It's the only place we can get water. 600 collapsed.
My neighbor is 800 feet.
800 feet?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll have to look at your well logs in our database. But regardless, the industry is not being permitted to hydraulically fracture within aquifers. That's what we refer to. The groundwater zones are the aquifers. So within a certain depth, they have to have the casing isolated. So they have to drill through it and make sure that there's no hydraulic fracturing activities within those zones. They are hydraulic fracturing, or proposed to, the shale gas zones that they would be hydraulic fracturing are 2.5 kilometers below ground. So there's quite a difference between where your shallow or intermediate groundwater is and where they're actually doing their operations. And that water is isolated. There's no interplay between those shallow intermediate zones and the deeper zones.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Lurch from the Tantramar Alliance Against Hydrofracking. This might sound like it's coming from left field. Well, actually it is coming from left field, but New Brunswickers are getting used to that. Here's my point. The leaders of governments around the world, every few years they send representatives to places like Kyoto and Rio and other wonderful places. And what they do, the countries that have the leverage, what they do is systematically and premeditatively undermine anything that is going to help heal the earth that we've gotten into such a mess. Well, what has happened? But oddly enough, in little old New Brunswick has arisen a movement from the grassroots, so that you go into Dopetown and you knock on a door and ask about shale gas, and they're going to tell you what they know about it because they've self-educated themselves about this. We are a movement that we should be proud of. It is not single issue because we are talking about our land, our water, our people, our health, our children, and we are not going to let this happen in New Brunswick.
My name is Phyllis Holmes, and I am from Hampton. I am a retired medical technologist. And after listening to a couple of people, I'm going to be quick, but I want to add a comment. That gentleman that works in Saudi Arabia, he does have a point. We have got a lot of natural potential under our ground. But I graduated in 1964 in medical technology, and my expertise was in the study of blood. And when I graduated, everybody said it would be impossible to identify white blood cells other than looking at them under the microscope. And by the time I retired, all I had to do was put a microsample of blood through a big machine, and within 7 seconds, I got the report, and it flew to the doctor's office by just pressing a button. And what I'm saying is, if we would just wait, I bet you any money in years to come, there's going to be a technology that's going to be risk-free, and then we tap into it. And I'm convinced that it's going to happen. It will. The other point that I want to make is that the lady that, I can't remember her name, with the beautiful long pigtail, she made a good point about literacy. I have read medical journal articles all my life, and by gum, I get confused when I read about hydrofracking. So I would say that my sorry, my basic language is French. My level of reading the English language is not as good, or wasn't as good as the French, but I still can read an article, make sense of it, but I gave up because there's a lot out there that I don't understand. So what I did, I thought, okay, fine. I'm going to sit and see what happened to the people of Penobscot and see what happens to them, because when I was a supervisor, the last 18 years of my career, I was a supervisor of the lab department. And I had to deal with companies. I had to sign multi-million-dollar contracts for equipment. And I can guarantee you, they scare me. Because the bottom line for these companies is they have to produce for shareholders. And I am going to tell you about 2 experiences that I had. I was sitting on a plane back from Toronto from looking at equipment, and at that time the hospital was in the process of deciding to buy major equipment. I won't go into details, but there were 4 people sitting in the back row that were naive enough that started to discuss the sell pitch for that hospital that I worked for, and they said they were talking about what they were going to let us know and what they were not going to let us know. And the bottom line is when I signed a contract, I was treated totally different after than before. Now, I have an article home, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but if the panel wants it, I'll dig it out because I've been saving them. But this article was written by a gentleman who has experience with the law. And his point is this: these companies have a slew of corporate lawyers. And when the government of New Brunswick signs a contract, I firmly believe there's going to be so much fine print that if the value of your property decreases, if you lose your water, if your land is worth nil, by geez, they're going to find a clause in that contract that will protect them. And I would say, because it happened to me when I was a supervisor. And just to put a basic thing across, how many people here have Blue Cross? Did you know that if you go see your doctor tomorrow and you think you have something wrong with your heart, and they do an EKG and do everything and you're perfectly normal, and if you go to Puerto Rico next week and you have a heart attack, you're not covered. Even though all the tests were normal, read the fine print, and it said if you go for consultation, so if you just go see your doctor because you think you had a heart problem but you don't, but if you have a heart attack, you're not covered. And that's the same mentality that's going to happen when the government of New Brunswick. And the thing is too, is people that are elected in government, they're smart. But I'm afraid that they're not going to be smart enough to read between the lines. And how many people in this room, raise your hand, how many people in this room, raise your hand, if you believe that if you lose the value of your property and you lose your water, how many people believe that because of the contract that the government signed, that the company is going to say, oh my gosh, yes, we're to blame. You don't need to go to court. We'll give it, how many people believe that? Show of hands. Woo, one. There you go. That's my point. Thank you for listening.
My name is Greg Cook. I am a resident of St. John, and I work with a community called in the Ethernet, New Brunswick is not for sale, since the government decided to suspend the recruitment of physicians and cut back nursing in the first week of January, a year ago January. Thank you, Dr. LaPierre and members of the New Brunswick Shale Gas Study Group, for this opportunity to speak to you in the hearing closest to the city of St. John, where I am a resident. In less than 450 words, I would like to explain why I was wearing a mask when I arrived today. These are concerns, for example, about safety, which we hear. A labor report in the US cites the shale gas industry as having the highest accident rate of all industry. Nationwide insurance company is expected to announce any day that, quote, after months of research and discussion, we have determined that the exposures presented by hydraulic fracturing are too great to ignore. For several types of insurance, the, quote, risks involved with hydraulic fracturing are now prohibited. Another concern is that short-term jobs, along with minimal royalty rates, may actually result in negative revenue to the province in the long term for maintenance of infrastructure, depreciated property values, environmental damage, and health services for the injured and ill. From public reports of your comments, Dr. LaPierre, to the media, however, it is clear you believe concerns for water have dominated public perception, and that's probably true. So I wish to draw attention to the threat of air pollution, which draws dust and noise factors as well, which includes dust and noise factors, as well as the silicone injury being discovered to the handlers of the sand in the fracking fluid. In this paper, published, which I will leave with you, it's 20, I think, pages in my left hand, was published in 26th of June 2010. There are 248 reports of harm to individuals in 12 different US states, with Pennsylvania, Texas, Colorado, West Virginia, and Arkansas dominating the list. The list includes 2 groups in class action suits. Each of the itemized reports has a supporting link attached. While water is identified as the source of the harm in approximately 65% of the cases, air is the source in 35% of the cases, with several cases involving both air and water. Air pollution is the focus, that has been the focus of my presentation this briefly. In the case of well water contamination, however, these remarks provide a link to news of what may be the first case of a lawsuit for contamination of well water in which there was full disclosure. Chesapeake Energy has agreed to pay $1.6 million in damages to 3 families in the Marcellus field. The paper I am handing you has 5 questions that we should be asking, and I won't ask them here, but essentially, for example, one of them would be, if this is a safe business in the US, for example, why would they have suspended all the laws protecting the environment and the water before they got involved in shale gas fracturing? It's a no-brainer question. If it sounds familiar, it seems like something like that's going on in Canada, secondly, after the US. Also, I would like to share with you Deborah Rogers' paper to the recent Rio conference, which I only discovered last night and downloaded and printed this morning for you. There is one paragraph I'd like to read if I'm not keeping these people behind me. The room's beginning to cool, as the human BT usually. To sum up, Deborah Rogers says to the Rio, although touted as the bridge fuel, shale gas may not be the best choice after all. Clearly, there are inherent difficulties with extraction, including toxic air toxics, possible groundwater ruination, water depletion, land consumption and subjugate degradation, methane emissions more potent than carbon dioxide, and health impacts to surrounding communities. Further, the economics are questionable at best. Platts Oil and Gas reporter a preeminent industry publication, stated in December the 10th that the switch from shale gas to shale oil suggests shale gas can survive only through cross-subsidization, not on its own merit. Perpetual expansion cannot forever disguise a serious problem with the bottom line. I've always felt like, Dr. Lapierre, your panel, your study group's figures for potential income, a little bit here and a little bit there, into the whole public purse, amaze me, because this game is over already in the United States. I mean, they're not going to convert their 11 LNG plants to get the gas to Asia, because Austria is going to beat them anyway, if in fact it is sustainable. In closing, I would like to thank you for this hearing, but I regret you have not held hearings in the province's major cities. 2 different polling companies clearly show there is no difference between rural and urban views of those concerned with shale gas. The Penobscot's loss of water demonstrates the case. The taxpayers of this province paid $10 million to provide water service, with industry contributing a token additional amount. The public purse of New Brunswick is in no particular backyard.
I'm a science teacher at Hampton High School, and because I'm a teacher, I'm an employee of the government, so I hope I still have my job in September, because what I have to say is not necessarily of great benefit to the government's position. I just wanted to ask a question. When we talk about environmental impact assessments, I'm not aware that there's been a comprehensive assessment done all the way down the river valley to assess for things such as radium-226, benzene levels that are currently established in the natural environment. And obviously, as these things are being drilled, we have high uranium deposits because of the shale, which of course is the radium-226. So I'm not aware of any kind of treatment facility that can take that radioactive material out of water. Aside from that, as a teacher, I guess I had the good fortune of being able to choose a profession that I could teach in small towns and live the kind of lifestyle that we have here in New Brunswick. And I have had the benefit, I guess, of living all over this country. I've lived in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, but I chose New Brunswick because of its beauty and its rural lifestyle. And it would really be terrible to lose that. When we talk about, everybody's made some fantastic points related to some of the environmental impacts and the potential toxicity that could impact us all, short term and in the long term. But I think that the whole traffic issue is a completely aesthetic thing, and that would be a shame to lose that, because that's why I chose to live here, and I'm sure I'm not alone. And we chose this rural lifestyle because it's what we love and what we would like to have for our kids, and it's where we'd like to, end our lives too. Obviously, I chose teaching because I really love kids, not just my own. I do love my own tremendously, but I have a vested interest in youth, obviously. And I'd love to see our youth stay in this province, but not just because there are oil and gas jobs. But what if we kind of think outside the box? What if we take our vision farther down the road than, say, 20 or 30 years, which is the short-term gain of this, the shale gas? And what if we set our sights on protecting our water? What if we set our sights on being an eco-tourism destination? And what if because with what's going on all over the world, this could be the destination in all of the world to find out what it was like to live with pure water, with uncontaminated land, and people could see firsthand that indeed it's possible. I just would also like to ask the question, are there recommendations, are there regulations set into place related to water consumption? Do we even know how much water we have, let alone how much we're willing, to use up in this kind of an industry that has a massive water demand? And my last point is this. If we have to go ahead with this because the government says they're speaking for all of us, I would suggest that perhaps we spend the next 2, 3, 5 years establishing what all of our baselines are, because any good science requires good baseline data. And then we choose one reputable company to experiment with shale gas extraction. And I choose Irving because they live here, their kids are here, and they know what it's like, this province. They're not coming from out of the country to come in and take off. They're here for the long haul. Now, that's not to say that that would be my goal is to have, I would like to see a moratorium until we get results from what's coming in globally and not just race forward, because the expertise just isn't out there, and we need experts to be able to monitor these sites, and we shouldn't move forward faster than we have people in place to monitor properly. That was my last point.
Thank you very much.
Dr. LaPierre, thank you for hosting this meeting tonight. My name is Mark Darcy. I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I have two very straightforward questions for you tonight. They just require a simple yes or no answer. My first question, are you going to report on the comments that you receive that just say no? Those people that are providing comments to you and they do not fit into any of the proposed recommendations for regulations, these people simply don't want shale gas development in this province. Will you be reporting on those comments in your report?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, does your mandate give you the ability to recommend a moratorium or a ban to the province, or at the very least, to initiate public hearings that would give New Brunswickers, all New Brunswickers, an opportunity to ask the question, do we really want shale gas development in the first place?
My mandate doesn't preclude me to provide any information to the government, so if I've heard many times moratorium, so my report will certainly have something on moratorium.
Right, so if you choose to, you could take all the feedback you've heard from New Brunswickers at these public meetings and your online comments, and if in fact you hear the majority that do not want shale gas, would you recommend or could you recommend to the province for a moratorium or a ban? Does your mandate allow you to do that?
No, my mandate doesn't. My mandate requires that I report to government what I've heard, but I don't have a mandate to decide whether a moratorium can take place. I can suggest that many people have suggested a moratorium, and the government will have to decide how it acts on that, but I can't make a recommendation on that issue, because I'm to report back to government on all what I've heard, and I will do that.
Okay.
We have to wait till the election.
But,
We may have to wait till the election to get.
well, I don't know about that. My report, I hope to have it in government by the end of November at the latest.
Thank you, Mr. Darcy.
Thank you. It seems that the government will need to hold public hearings and so that New Brunswickers have an opportunity to voice their opinions about a moratorium or a ban in this province. Thank you.
My name is Jean-Louis Deveau, and I'm from Fredericton. In terms of my credentials, I have a master's in biology and I have a PhD in sociology. And one of my areas of expertise, if I can use that term, is that I have learned how to analyze text. I do textual analyses of documents, such as one called the Responsible Environmental Management of Oil and Gas Activities in New Brunswick. So, I just have a few comments, but I want to mention, before I start into that, I just want to mention that one of the things that we haven't heard much at these public consultation meetings is that the regulations, this discussion paper, is the precursor to the toughest, most stringent regulations on the continent.
Yeah.
So that means that when one looks at this, one should not be able to find very many flaws. I would like to draw your attention to section 9.11 of the document, which mentions that no compressor station or well pad can be constructed within 500 meters of a school or within 250 meters of a house. Now, when I see numbers like that, first thing that comes to mind is, where in the world does those numbers come from? Why not 750 meters or 1.5 kilometers? Where do those numbers come from? Well, I sent an email to a member of the National Gas Group, and I'm not going to identify the person until I get his or her permission. But the question I asked is, where does this number come from? The answer that I got was, or is, as follows, and I quote, "As is the case in all recommendations contained in the discussion document, the Natural Gas Group considered existing and proposed regulations in other North American jurisdictions, plus studies and recommendations prepared by non-governmental organizations, and then formulated recommendations based on all the information gathered. The recommended setbacks in section 9.11 are thought to exceed the current requirements in most other jurisdictions." That's the response that I received. And there's nothing wrong with that response except for one thing. Every person who reads the document should be able to come to the same conclusion. That's how science works. And this document that we've been asked to review, to provide comments on, is a scientific document. And in science, it's not the author who has the final word, it's the person who reads the document. The way that things should have happened with respect to how that setback distance was basically outlined was that there should have been references to some work that had been done to legitimize that setback distance. There may have been a researcher somewhere who came up with this value, 250 meters, or 500 meters, or whatever. That would give another researcher an opportunity to do the same study and either come back with the same results or come back with results that differ. That's how science works in providing regulations to the industry. At the moment, there is a split between the document called Responsible Resource Development and the list of references. We have no way whatsoever of validating any of the numbers that exist in that document. And on that basis, not only is it poor science, but it does certainly not meet the requirements of what one would consider to be a precursor to the toughest regulations on the continent.
This is our province. This is our home. This is our children and their children. The gentleman that works in Asia, he used the phrase, dumb down. Nobody has to dumb down anything for me. And I would say 99.9% of the people in this room. We are well read, we have well researched, we are well informed. And I made this statement in Lower Durham. Okay? So I'm suggesting to anybody, do not insult me by suggesting you dumb it down for any of us. While people are away working in the oil fields, wherever that may be, we have been asking this government to stop this. It's not like we've just been laying around making phone calls to each other, you know. We've been out pounding the friggin' streets in November, sleeping in a teepee in November, you know, going on walks. I'm talking women, and I'm not even going to tell you how old I am. Women and men way older than me, because they care enough about this province and our home to do that. I see little babies. I see little babies in this room tonight. You know, we're willing to bring our babies so that we can stop this. Don't dumb anything down for us at all. Don't tell us that we haven't been going to the government. This isn't the first time that we are in front of the government. We've been doing it, I personally, and I know other people longer, for a year. I went to one meeting, it scared the hell right out of me, and I've been on this path ever since. It terrifies me that this lady back here, the teacher, has to say, I'm a government employee and I might be stepping out of line here. I was a government employee too. It's bad when you're the term working the street. We were doing, handing out pamphlets at the Harvest Jazz and Blues in Fredericton. And you don't know the government employees that went by and said, thanks for doing this, I'm not allowed to speak up. That's the kind of democracy we don't have. We do not have a say in our province in any way, shape, or form. What terrifies me is that this province, I thought, honestly, maybe I am dumb. I honestly thought that this group of people, and you as the moderator, thank you, were kind of independent, you know, and that you were listening to both sides equally. What I'm hearing here tonight, again, is defending. You are defending the government and their regulations. That is not an unbiased position to be in. I worked really hard at not saying anything tonight. Really, people who know me that are sitting back there, okay? But there's just some things I have to say, you know? I don't have a science degree. The other ladies talked about all the mumbo jumbo. I don't understand a whole lot of it. What I do know is that it's bad. Okay, I know all the basics of fracking. I know I guess it was the same gentleman from Rouge-Gornish, which, by the way, is an absolutely gorgeous part of the province, if you've ever been there. Grew up not too far from there, okay? I don't even know where I was going with that. I get so worked up. Isn't that awful? Anyways, a couple more things to say, and I'm not asking you a question. I'm making a statement here. Okay, fair enough. I'm making a statement. Oh, I know where I was going with that. This gentleman over here talked about the shafts and everything, 20 to 30 years, chances are we're safe. That makes my youngest grandchild 45 years old. Hopefully, he has children of his own. And it is not good enough to tell me that those shafts are only good for 20 to 30 years. Maybe longer. Maybe longer. It's not good enough. I might be gone. I might be gone from this world. But the generations coming after us, they should have the same opportunities and the chance that we have had. And maybe, instead of all the scientific mumble jumbo, and you guys have all these degrees and all this kind of stuff, I want you to go with your heart instead of your head. Go with your heart instead of your head. That's big. You will find you will have a different perspective on life, believe me. The lady in pink that spoke, and she said that we say no. We do. We say no. And you can do all this stuff you want to do, or the government wants you to do, we're going to say no. When it starts happening, and it's already happening, we know that. When this all comes down the pipe, remember this face, this old face, okay? Because I might be the one standing in front of you and your colleagues to stop this, okay? And there's no threat in that. That's the reality. I'm on the tail end of my life, okay? I'm willing to go to the wall. I'm willing to go to the wall. And I got a feeling there's a whole bunch of people here, am I right, that are going to go to the wall.
Thank you, Mrs. Whalen. Yes.
Hi, my name is Chad Crawford. I live and work in Sussex. I, as many of all of you, have family members that work in Alberta. I have a cousin who is directly involved with hydraulic fracturing in Alberta. I myself am lucky enough to live in New Brunswick and have a job in oil and gas. I enjoy my work every day. I get up, I go, I haven't missed a day in 2 years. I'm perfectly healthy, fine, 22 years of age. I got tickets, licensed millwright from here to British Columbia. I feel comfortable with this. If this doesn't go forward, I'm packing my bags, I'm selling my house, I'm moving to Alberta, and I'll send transfer payments back to New Brunswick to support all of you. We need, no, I'm talking here. I pay taxes, I've gone to school, I see what happens, I'm out in it every day. If it happens in New Brunswick, I know about it in oil and gas right now. That's all I gotta say, because you guys don't want to listen to me, but I'm for 100% oil and gas, whether it be shale oil, conventional oil, I am for it. Thank you.
I'm Jane Berry from Rothsay. Sustainable development must be a key and overarching principle relative to any gas or oil exploration or development in New Brunswick. I would ask you to pass on the message.
Please ask for some quiet. Thank you. Ms.
Please pass on the message that the decisions are certainly going to affect future generations, as many here tonight have said. Yes, as the young man just said, diversifying our economy and strengthening it is needed, but not at any price. We don't want short-term gain for long-term pain. The storage of mine tailings and nuclear waste have essentially been left for future generations to solve. With regard to nuclear waste, the years are ticking by and still suitable sites have not been identified or the means with which for long-term storage. Regarding waste liquids and solids, many responsible corporate entities are using closed-loop technology and recycling, and I think this should be embedded as a principle. My remarks mostly are directed at water, but I certainly had many interesting points brought to my attention tonight, and the effect on air and that of methane and how it would affect global warming are of concern, as are the long-term issues regarding the wells once they are decommissioned. Water, once tainted, even if it's in parts per billion, can take years, if not generations, to restore. When you hear, see, and learn of the heartache, upheaval, anger, and disruption of families and lives caused by a lack of or unfit water, it makes an indelible impression. And it certainly has for me in the past. Even if water were the only medium used in hydraulic fracturing, its use in large quantities could be hugely significant. But what about the research on and knowledge of long-term effects of other chemicals used? Impacts on health must be the subject of research and study, and our New Brunswick physicians have certainly spoken out in this regard. Some of the chemicals listed on the government website may truly be found in household use, but we don't drink or eat antifreeze, plastics, or preservatives. What kind of bonds will be posted or guarantees made for the long term if things go wrong or companies disband? They can be here today and gone tomorrow, but industrial, mining, tar sands, and nuclear waste is a burden on us all for the long term. A flight over our province can be an eye-opener to see some of these tailings ponds out of sight and out of mind. Who will pay the costs of oversight, scrutiny, and training for government enforcement? It certainly shouldn't be self-policed by industry. How much knowledge and experience has accumulated in a short time on hydraulic fracturing? Many years were taken before the landfills in our province were sited, with lots of public consultation and study, with careful consideration of the effects on our water and natural environment. I urge a careful, go-slow approach. It is regrettable these sessions are timed in summer when so few, even though it is a large group here tonight, are able to attend, and at locations too remote for many. I encourage you, Dr. Lapierre, to use your wealth of knowledge and experience to reach an impartial, exhaustive, carefully considered, and scientifically based report in which all New Brunswickers can have confidence. Thank you.
My name is Chris Rundle. I'm from Hampton, New Brunswick. I'm a member of the Council of Canadians and a member of Hampton Water First. My first question, my first point is that the credibility of the government of New Brunswick on the shale gas issue is measured by your actions in Penobscot. And I feel, from what I've learned talking to the people in Penobscot and hearing what's going on in the commission hearings in Sussex this week, that the experience of the people of Penobscot, that the government of New Brunswick, their record on this issue is a black mark. The government of New Brunswick, time and time again, is saying, trust us, we will protect you. And yet, when the people of Penobscot need the protection of their government, it is not given to them. Your government experts that you say will protect us, you talked about the regulations, you talked about hiring the experts you need to enforce these regulations and make sure that the companies are doing what the regulations say they must do, and yet the experience of Penobscot is that your government experts, when called to testify against big industry, suddenly know nothing and remember nothing. As I came in the door, I was given a document entitled Case Studies and Lessons Learned. In the province of Quebec, they had a very important lesson that the province of New Brunswick could learn from. They embarked on what amounted to a pilot project, and they monitored and measured the experience on the initial wells in New Brunswick, and they found that 19 of 31 wells were leaking and they failed. And on the basis of that empirical evidence, the province of Quebec has said no to shale gas. So my question to you is, given the experience that we have a golden opportunity in the towns of Penobscot and in the town of Elgin, New Brunswick, to measure what is happening with the wells that are already here. Yes. So my question to you, Dr. Lapierre, is why is the government of New Brunswick not taking that opportunity? Why are they not learning from the experience in Quebec? Why are they not measuring and monitoring air quality and water quality in Penobscot and Elgin?
I think Dr. Lapierre would bring your point to government. I'm not sure.
I can't answer that question.
Is there anyone in this room who could answer that question? Why is the government not testing water and air?
There's been some tests done, but I can assure you that we're going to bring that back to government and look at this the second time it's come up today, but also with Mr. Wolpen. And once again, at these meetings, they're discussion meetings, and we take points that you give us and bring it back to government.
Okay, so my second point is you have explained to us that the phased EIA process, which the province of New Brunswick is quite proud of, is our last line of defense. You are saying to us, you have said to us earlier this evening, that if evidence arises to prove, as we believe, that this industry is not safe, that our last line of defense, the only way we can stop this in New Brunswick is through the phased EIA process. And my question to the panel is quite simple. In the history of this process in the province of New Brunswick, can you give me one example of a large industrial project that has been stopped by the EIA?
No. It doesn't exist.
Again, we can provide that, but please leave us your information and we will talk to the EIA folks.
Okay, so the reason we're here tonight is looking at your recommendations to government. You have spoken from this panel at the front this evening about the fact that industry has very deep pockets. And if you want to go head to head with industry, as the people of Penobscot are discovering, they have very deep pockets, and the process of defending yourself against industry is a very expensive proposition. So if industry has very deep pockets and government appears to collude with industry when it comes time for an inquiry into the facts, and the citizens do not have the funds, that is an unfair playing field. It's unfair to say that our only defense, our last line of defense is the EIA, and yet we as volunteer citizens, volunteering our own time, volunteering our own money, are expected to defend the province against big industry with their deep pockets. It's not going to happen. It's not a reasonable proposition. So my question to you is, what are your recommendations with regard to the phased EIA process? And will you provide public money for the defense of the province?
I think the term we would use for that is intervener funding. In other words, what that means is that government would give funds to people who wish to make representation as part of an EIA. And that's a good recommendation, and I wrote it down, and I encourage you to forward it if you feel you want to. Intervener funding has been provided in EIA in the past in New Brunswick, but it's more or less on a case-by-case basis. So one of the recommendations could be that that's made more of a policy. Mandatory. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
My name is Carolyn Luba-Darcy. I live in Fredericton, and I'm a health professional. I urge you to please have meetings in the larger cities in this province so that a lot of people can be accessed and not have to burn fossil fuels like crazy to get to meetings. I am against shale gas for all the reasons mentioned earlier tonight, so I don't really have anything new to add. But I'd like to comment to some of the comments made by people that are working in the oil industry. And I agree with them that it's hypocritical for us not to want this here, but to expect it to happen somewhere else. The oil and gas industry has hurt people all over the world environmentally, and usually, the actual people don't benefit. It's usually industry. And we all know that big oil is very powerful and is therefore precluding the change that needs to happen in the world, where we need to end the fossil fuel subsidies that governments give us. So what I would like to say is that I think most of us would love to have a different source of energy at our disposal as easily as going to the gas station and getting our gasoline, getting oil for our heating, and gas, which is readily given to us through pipes put everywhere in the cities. If we had as easy access to green energy, I know that a lot of us would jump on it, and then we could have a more local-based economy that is green. We don't have to feel guilty about hurting other people while we're happily living our energy-heavy lives. So I think, I really urge the no shale gas movement too to start talking about this. We need to demand a green economy. This is the big elephant in the room that people don't seem to talk about, but it has to be done, and we all know this. Our environment is in a state of emergency. For my child's future and all future generations, why are we going after the end game in fossil fuels, shale gas? We know we're going to run out eventually. We keep digging deeper and going into more dangerous areas like the Arctic, the oceans, with more high risks. We need to stop this, and we've got to start talking about something else. And I know that our Harper government is not helping us on this, but we need to start asking for it at home. That's all I have to say.